so you know who we are. And I'm going to start with our township engineer to the extreme left, Phil Worcester. We have our township clerk, Debbie McBreen. To the extreme right, we have our solicitor, Joe Pizzo. Our council members are Stacy Champion, right here. Joe Knowles will not be here this evening. We have Michelle Benitez, councilwoman. We have our vice chairman, Joe Paleria. I'm Ed Kisselback. I'm the chairman. I want to please rise for a moment of silent meditation or prayer, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Mayor Joseph DiGirolamo will not be with us this evening as our guest. Moving right along, we're going to agenda item number 2, which is public comment. This will be on any agenda item. Would anyone like to make any comments on anything that's on the agenda this evening? We do have a second chance at that later on. We have agenda item number 3, which is the approval of the council minutes. We have January 9th and January 23rd. We can take them separately or together if there's no changes. So are there any changes on January 9th or January 23rd? Any additions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to accept as presented.
I'll make a motion we accept the 9th and the 23rd as presented.
We have a motion.
Second.
Second. All those in favor signify with an aye. Aye. And against, any abstentions? That is unanimous. Mr. Pazzo, would you like to comment on, we have a few cancellations and a few items that may be tabled for a later date. We have several, so if you want to go through that, if you'd be kind enough.
I would be happy to. Mr. Kisselback, items 4 and 5 on this evening's agenda. Gibson Holdings, LLC. We received correspondence from the applicant's attorney advising that there's a scheduling conflict for this evening, and they're asking that the application be tabled to the council meeting scheduled for March 13, 2023. The applicant has given us an extension of time of the necessary deadlines under the MPC through and including March 31. So if council is of a mind, a single motion to table items 4 and 5 to March 13 would be appropriate.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.
I'd like to make a motion to table item 4, consideration of preliminary and final subdivision, for our next meeting on March 13th, 2023, for Gibson Holdings, LLC.
And number 5 also.
And item number 5, consideration of a resolution for Act number 537, PA Sewage Facilities Act, plan revision for new land development of parcel of land identified as 1515 Gibson Road subdivision, to also table that to our next meeting, 3/13/23.
Motion on the floor.
Second.
Second on the motion. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And against? Okay, that's 4-0. Agenda item number 6. This is a consideration of a preliminary and final land development. This is for Holy Ghost Prep.
Mr.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Kissel,
Did I miss something? I'm sorry. You continue. We jumped on
if
that
you'd like,
anyway.
I can,
No,
there
you
are
might
a
as
few
well
others
go.
to
No,
announce.
you're right.
As to agenda item number 7, application of James Doherty for 6008 Grant Avenue. Again, counsel for the applicant, who happens to be the same attorney, I might add, has a scheduling conflict this evening, has asked that the item be tabled to the council meeting of March 13, and has granted the township an extension of time of all of the applicable deadlines under the municipality's planning code through and including March 31, 2023.
Okay, well, let's accept that one, and let's put a motion on the floor. If we'd like to table it to March the 13th, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
It is. We have a motion.
I'll second it.
We have a second. It goes to Stace. All those in favor signify with an aye. Aye. And against, any abstentions? And we have agenda item number 9. Mr. Paiza?
And then for agenda item number 9, counsel for the applicant wrote to the township earlier today, advised of a scheduling conflict, and for this particular application has asked that it be tabled to a date certain of March 27, 2023, which would be the second council meeting in March. Again, the applicant has granted the township the necessary extensions of time under the municipality's planning code through and including March 31, 2023.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, your pleasure.
So moved.
We have a motion on the floor to move it to March 27th, agenda item number 9. All those in favor? Aye. Any against? Any abstentions? Unanimous. Okay.
You need me to second.
What did I say?
You need us-
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, moving along. Okay. I wasn't even waiting for a motion. Okay, now let's go to agenda item number 6. Did you say they were canceling also, Mr. Paizo? I didn't hear that. I wasn't sure.
Those are all of the changes to the agenda of which I'm aware, sir.
Okay, here we go. Application is Holy Ghost Prep, 2429 Bristol Pike, an athletic field. This is classified as zoning of institutional and a tax map parcel 02061-288. And we read what you're trying to do, what you're going to do, and I'd like to have someone come up from Holy Ghost Prep to make your presentation to us for our consideration.
Good evening. My name is Greg Garrison. I'm the president of Holy Ghost Prep. I wanted to offer just a quick introductory remarks. Thank you for hearing us this evening. We're looking forward to the project, and the process has been one that's been extremely beneficial for Holy Ghost and for our constituency, our community. One of the things we're really excited about is that not only will it benefit our immediate community, that is the students and our families, but we're looking forward to integrating it fully into the community of Bensalem as well. We know that neighbors love to be on our track, and we open up the facilities for lots of athletic programs, and so we share that with you on our behalf and for you.
It's a great track.
I'd like to introduce Mike Boker. Mike is the engineer for us on the project, and he'll be sharing with you the plans for your question and answers.
Craig, what's your last name? I'm sorry.
Garrison, Geruson.
Thank you.
Sure.
And Mike, you're the engineer, is that correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay. What do you need?
Doesn't show up here when it's up there.
You can see it on the front, too.
It is now. So the sheet you see up on the screen now is the, yeah. That one? I can't see that.
You got it.
Which one am I gonna do?
It's okay, I'll steer.
You steer.
Got a team there, right?
Yes. That better. Thank you. Sorry for that. So the plan we have up on the screen now is the current existing conditions of the school campus. The campus is about 43.5 acres. The project area, which is defined roughly by this black outline that you see on this plan, is the area where we're going to be doing the proposed work. So currently, there's an existing natural grass field within inside the track. That area is going to be converted to a synthetic turf field. We are going to retain the track and actually rebuild it on the base of the existing track, so the track will stay in its current location. And then there will be synthetic turf in the interior of the track, along with two what we call D zones, and I'll show you when we get to the proposed plans, that will have events like long jump, triple jump, and pole vault on either side of the new field. The area down to the lower left of the track and field area is where they have their field events, shot put, javelin, discus, and they will continue to take place down in that area. So I'll bring up, if you get back to that folder, the LS one. Sheet 4, I think. LS. This is just a blow-up of the existing conditions, noting what's going to be removed as far as some of the existing features. You go to the next one. Yeah. Make that full screen. So this shows the area of the field blown up that we'll be working on. The green representing the area of the synthetic turf field, which will be a multi-use, multi-purpose field for different sports. The areas to the right and left, to the right of that, the area which is referred to as the D zone, which is in between the track and the synthetic turf area. You'll see areas for the triple jump and long jump. To the left of the field in the D zone, you will see areas for the high jump and pole vault. And then again, down to the lower left, we have the javelin throwing area, discus, and shot put will be kept in that area. So in conjunction with this development, a major portion of the work on site will be stormwater management. So as we remove the natural grass field, we have to excavate down to install the stormwater management below the synthetic turf surface. And in doing so, we will perform stormwater management to meet not only your ordinance, but the requirements of the state and our MPDS permit, which we actually have already received for this project. So there will be a reduction in the flows from the site. There's a proposed bleachers stand in this area. The bleachers are elevated, the front of the bleachers will be elevated 4 feet above the track so that people in that viewing area won't be obstructed by athletes on the sidelines. The track currently has a driveway for access out to the existing parking lot in this location. As part of our plans, we will be providing a landscape buffer along this side of the parking lot to help screen parking lot from the field or vice versa, the field from the parking lot. And we will also be providing a hatched crosswalk from the field to the existing field house. So athletes going to use bathrooms or have to gain access to the field house will have a safe path to make it from the field to the field house. And you can see that it's coming off the screen in this direction towards the field house.
So you're going to actually paint a crosswalk now, so?
Yes.
Because I know the area pretty well, I'm there quite often, and the entrance is, so you're going to make the landscaping look much nicer than it does now?
Yes, we are. We're adding some trees, and there will be a hedge basically developed along the perimeter of that bottom edge of that parking lot. And there's also an existing dumpster a little further to the right on that parking lot, and we're going to provide some screening on either side of that as well.
Okay. Because it does look old, I would say, is probably
Yes.
the good word to put it, and it's hard to figure out which is the entrance to that area, so that'll be nice.
Yes, that will help define that entrance. All the walks are being made ADA accessible that we're adding to the project, so access to the field will be improved, as well as access to the bleacher seating area will be ADA accessible as well. There's areas in between and on either side of that for handicap seating. We also propose 4 field lights around the field. You can see they're located here, 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 and here. Those lights are 70-foot high field lights, and they are LED lighting. So the nice thing about LED lighting is it's very directional. So we very much eliminate the glare or spillage from the field area to the adjoining area. In fact, by the time you're 150 feet away from the edge of the field, that level of lighting has been reduced to an average of 0.006 foot candles. So it's basically diminished by the time you're 150 feet away from that field, which to the south side of the field, there is a wooded area that's being retained. That 150 feet would be about the middle of the wooded area. And that's not taking into account any screening or shielding that the trees would do. So we don't foresee any spillage on 295 or to any of the neighboring properties. It's a very good location to actually provide the lighted fuel on campus. It's interior to the site, and don't expect any adverse impact to any of the neighboring properties.
Is this project going to be leased out to other groups and organizations that might come there? So it's going to be basically, you'll be generating income from this. We have need for this, there's no doubt about that, but how are we going to handle the police department? Because you're going to need traffic control out there, and, you know, with everything going on in this world today, for us to have to put police officers out there doing traffic, are you guys going to pay for the extra police officers? How's that going to be handled? Because it's an expense that wouldn't be fair to the residents of Bensalem, because you are using it as a moneymaker to help with your facilities and everything you're doing. Can you come up to you have to go up to the microphone.
Yeah, that's a great question, and what we do currently is whenever the opportunity presents itself, we hire the Bensalem Township police officers. They provided assistance for the Holt Center when we hold events. They provide assistance when people are using the Firebird Fieldhouse, and we use them for specific events appropriately for this athletic complex.
I just want to get that on the record. I mean, you guys
Absolutely.
have been good to our Special Olympians. We have basketball games over there against the Holy Ghost people. You do wonderful things over there. We have need for turf fields in this township. It's a shame we're not doing any of them, but it's something that's needed to have complexes of these things to get out there, because it's the future.
Oh, no,
So I'm glad to see that this is happening.
Yeah, that's great to hear, and absolutely we're doing that. We
Yeah.
do it currently and will continue to.
Good, thank you.
Sure.
That's the only question I have. I don't know if anybody else has any.
No, if that's your presentation, which we're pretty familiar with what you're doing, we've all reviewed your presentation. These are the waivers that you were requesting, so we're going to go directly to that, which is on page 4, and it's from Kenneth Farrell, Director of Building and Planning. And on page 4, there's a request for waivers. Do you see those 3 waivers?
Yes.
Okay, the first waiver you're requesting is partial waiver from providing utilities within 100 feet of the property. Can you explain that?
Yes, so we have provided and located all the utilities within the project area. We were just asking for a partial waiver not to extend 100 feet outside the property, given that the impact of this project is very interior to the site and would not impact those utilities further outside the project area.
So there's some that are out there already, and you don't want to bring them back in because it doesn't make sense, is that?
We don't need to bring any additional, there's already water to the field, so we will continue to provide more of a bottle filling station than the current water fountain that's there, but we don't need to bring any sewer or anything from
Right.
the street to the site.
Okay. And then the second waiver you're requesting is to be reviewed concurrently as a preliminary and final plan. Well, that will go without saying. And then, of course, you have to provide the HDPE instead of the RCP. Phil?
Yes, that's one we've been talking about recently, that our standards have changed with regard to reinforced concrete pipe versus the new plastic pipe. And we're proposing the plastic pipe for everything that comes through these days. It's inexpensive, lasts longer, et cetera. And like I said, we've talked about that before. So we just have not been able, we haven't changed the ordinance yet. We're in the process of changing the stormwater ordinance and modifying it and updating it, and that'll be included in that.
Okay, it makes sense. I mean, everything is
And
for
that's a money
years.
saver, so why, and
Yeah.
it's going to last longer, why not? Why wouldn't you do
Sure.
it, you know?
Okay, is there any other part of your presentation you would like to make to us at this time?
We do have a rendering if you're interested in seeing that, and just a note, we do tend
Certainly.
to comply with all the comments in the
Sure, we
letter.
would like to see the rendering.
This is a rendering looking back from the main school building out over the field complex with 95 in the background. You can see the
John Lundy
bleachers.
track, forget it.
So,
It looks beautiful. Everything you do is beautiful. So, I mean, the Holt Center, I think, on the other side of Bristol Pike is beautiful for an athletic interior building that you have. This would be good. And why you never bought the charter school when you had that opportunity will never register in my mind.
I beat myself up about it all the time.
Do you? Okay. All right, so we're on the same thought, exactly right. Okay, at any rate, is there anyone who would like to come, is there any other questions from the council at this time? If not, would anyone like to come forward and make a presentation either for or against this proposal? Not seeing any, I'll ask for a motion to be put on the floor.
So moved.
We have a motion on the floor to accept as presented.
Second?
We have a second on that. All those in favor signify with an aye. Aye. And against, the abstentions. Thank you very much, gentlemen and
you.
ladies.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. They should all be this easy. Right?
What's that?
So they should all be this easy.
Yeah, I know.
Yes. I'm gonna, moving on to agenda item number 8, we have a consideration of a preliminary land development. This is for Federation Housing Incorporated. This is on 4701 Somerton Road. This is a senior living residential development. This is going to be R66, which is intergenerational district. And the tax map parcel is 02 003 08 008, excuse me, 003. And sir, if you'd be kind enough to give me your name?
Yes, good evening, Joe Blackburn from Whistler Pearlstein, here on behalf of the applicant, FHI Trevos Land Holdings, Inc., with respect to its application concerning the property located at 4701 Somerton Road. The subject property consists of approximately 10.37 acres and is located in both the R66 Intergenerational Residential Zoning District as well as the SCH Special Citizens Overlay Zoning District. As I'm sure the members of this board are well aware, the property is presently improved with an approximately 60-unit elderly living care community known as the Florence E. Greenhouse, which is generally depicted as the building on the left of the plan before you. I know it's a little difficult to see as it's not highlighted, but it is the plan left building. That building and its associated improvements were approved by this board in or about 2009. And at the time of the approval, it was understood and expected by, I think, everyone involved, it's fair to say, that that development and that scope of improvements was constituted or was to be considered phase 1 of the development of this site, with a second mirror image building, as you see depicted plan left, to ultimately be implemented if and when the demand and need arose. The applicant has benefited from the good fortune of having both an immediate and sustained demand since its opening shortly after the approval in 2009, such that as a part of tonight's application, we are here seeking preliminary as final land development approval to construct, as I mentioned, a essentially mirror image building depicted plan right, consisting, as the existing building does, of 3 stories, approximately 22,000 square foot footprint, which would house an additional 60 elderly living units, as well as an additional 44 off-street parking spaces. We have worked collaboratively over the last months with the township's staff and professionals to get to a place where we are today, which I'm pleased to say is that all the remaining items in the TPD letter dated, excuse me, February 13th, 2023 are will comply items, with the exception of the waivers denoted therein, which I would note the letter does make specific support or express specific support of each of those waivers, but I am nevertheless happy to go through each of those individually.
Why don't we do that? We know
Certainly.
what you're going to comply with. We have that on our papers here.
Certainly.
And let's see what you're requesting for a waiver and see what we can do.
Certainly.
Can I ask Mr.
Yeah.
Pizzo a question first?
Okay, well, hold on.
Mr. Pizzo, the gentleman said that we considered this a Phase 1, Phase 2 project back in 2009. I don't recollect that. Was that in the motion at that point, that this was, that was Phase 1 and there's going to be a Phase 2? Or was that just a discussion? Do you know, to your recollection?
I do not believe the project was approved as a Phase 1, Phase 2 at the time. Again, as Mr. Blackburn said, it was anticipated that there might be a future expansion should there be the need, should there be the opportunity. But this plan that's in front of you now stands on its own. It's not.
And that's fine. I just want to make sure, because we said, it was said that we considered a Phase 1, Phase 2. That was never brought up as part of the hearing or brought up as part of the motion for it, and I just want that on the record, that's all.
Certainly, and I didn't mean to insinuate that there was any level of approvals for this granted in 2009. Simply that, as you can see,
I'm just saying, there was no discussion from this board while Ed and I were on the board.
Certainly.
The women weren't on the board then. I don't ever remember that coming up, that there was a possible Phase 1 and Phase 2. It may have been discussed with others, but we
Understood.
didn't do it at that meeting, so.
Understood,
Thank you.
absolutely. With respect to the waivers, which are noted on the fourth page of the TPD engineer's review letter, the first is with respect to plan details extending upwards of 400 feet off the site. Typically, we would accommodate that and accomplish that via an aerial as opposed to a detailed plan rendering for all the improvements and features upwards of 400 feet off the site. The next two waivers listed there have to do both with the processing of the plans as preliminary as final. Hopefully pretty self-explanatory with respect to those two. The only two, what I'll call substantive waivers, have to do first with slopes. And the waiver with respect to slopes has to do with, can we put up that one with the topo on the right-hand side? On the plan on the right-hand side of the plan, now the sheet before you, you can see the topography. The site slopes from plan right to plan left, with the right-hand side being higher in elevation. As you can see, the lines of topography there are quite condensed. That is because of our desire to preserve woodlands on that area, not disturb those areas, to regrade them as you approach the property line. You'll also see that there is a 20-foot wide fire lane emergency access strip identified there, which we need to achieve a level ground for pretty rapidly and dramatically in order to provide fire access to all sides of the building at the request of the fire chief. So in order to accomplish that and also preserve the woodlands on the eastern side of the property, we seek to not have to entirely regrade that strip between the edge of the fire lane and the property line, which we could probably accomplish, but would obviously be at the expense of some pretty mature woodlands in those areas and existing buffers.
Where is that? Do you have a pointer you can
Yeah,
illustrate?
right along the eastern side of the property. So this area right here, all this topography you're seeing, this is the slopes which would exceed the 3-to-1. And again, we could grade that out to be less dramatic, but in doing so, we would lose all the trees in that area. Here's the fire lane, the emergency access that I alluded to, 20-foot wide to provide access around the entirety of the property. So in order to get from a high point as quickly as possible to a flat grade to accomplish, oh geez, what did I do? Oh, there we go. In order to get from a high point to a flat grade to accommodate that fire lane as quickly as possible, we have some not dramatic, but excessive with respect to what the ordinance allows slopes in those areas. So,
Okay. And that's 4?
yeah, that's waiver 4. And waiver 5 is to permit sidewalk within an existing sanitary sewer. Going back, as a part of this plan, we are integrating sidewalks not only on Somerton Pike, but also internal to the site to enhance pedestrian connectivity and walkability. And that's with respect not only to the proposed building, but as you can see here, with respect to the existing building. This is the offending strip of sidewalk, if you will, which extends from the existing building, interconnecting down to the sidewalk on Somerton Pike. This dashed line here, this being the bottom and this being the top, is a sanitary sewer easement, which in order to get to Somerton Pike, we necessarily have to cross over. So it is this limited area of sidewalk within the existing sanitary sewer easement that necessitates that waiver. Applicant certainly understands that were there a need for access to the sanitary sewer lines in those areas, that sidewalk would potentially need to be dug up and then replaced at applicant's expense. The ordinance, however, simply prohibits any sort of improvement or, impervious over those areas in order to ensure their ability to be accessed, or rather to ensure the pipes in those easement areas to be accessed, which we're still preserving in this scenario. So, and again, that's the limited area where that waiver is.
When you do that, however, are you just going to put 4 inches of concrete over there as consistent with the depth of any normal sidewalk, or are you going to build around the sanitary sewer flow pipes with either cinder block or something to support it?
It will just, it will be
He's got to
typical
come
sidewalk
up,
and
he's
dock.
got to come up and introduce himself. And then he is-
Yeah, go ahead, introduce yourself.
Chris Pazinas with Bowler Engineering. So the sidewalk in that area will be typical construction with stone base and then concrete on top. The sanitary sewer is deep enough that the sidewalk won't impact it.
Phil, you good with that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Are you good with the one before that, the fourth one?
I am, in fact, I applaud it because we're trying to save trees, water, all that kind of stuff. So these are the types of, and they work with us on this design, as well as the pedestrian interconnection and that easement. We think they're good. They're good for the community.
Okay.
So as I said, with the balance of those items, all comments in the February 13th letter will comply. You heard from the project engineer, Mr. Pazinas from Bowler. I am also joined by Shoshana Bannett, the Director of Real Estate and Development for the applicant, and I'm happy to make myself, Mr. Pazinas or Mrs. Bannett, available for any questions that any members of the board may have.
We have a letter from February 14th from the fire department rejecting your submission.
Yes.
Can you give us an update on that?
Yeah, we had conversations as recently as today with the fire chief and confirmed that all the improvements shown on the plan before you tonight address those comments. I think Chris had those conversations. He can confirm that those items are not only will comply, but have in fact already been complied with on the plan that you have before you tonight.
With one change to that statement, we are going to change the water line just to interconnect the two hydrants outside of the building, so the fire line will be looped around the entire building, just for more consistent service. But we will comply.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
There's two hydrants that are being proposed outside of the building.
And where are they?
There's one in this corner here and one here. Currently, the way the water system's designed, the water comes in and feeds this hydrant, and there's a second line that comes around the building for this hydrant. We're going to interconnect them also. So it will be one fire service loop that goes the entire way around the building.
Your buildings are sprinkled too, right, for the residents?
Correct.
So the comments in that February 14th letter will comply or have been complied with, yes.
So the comment that you just made regarding the loop, was that in compliance with the request of the fire department? Is that why you did it that way?
Yes.
Okay.
And even though the lines are interconnected, they still are independent of each other, is that correct?
Correct.
But you have the same water flow coming through both of them, so if you open one, you're gonna have less water at the other. That's part of the fire
All that
service.
goes into the meter pit sizing and the coordination with Aqua to make sure that there's adequate pressure based on the flow tests that they provide.
Did the UT or did the fire marshal's office have anything to say about that? Because that's one of the issues that we've had with the fire service, is making sure we have enough water to do these things.
My understanding, this has all been completely resolved with the battalion chief regarding the whole fire circuit with regard to water. I will say that as part of the final recording of the plan and plan approval, developers agreements, et cetera, they'll have a clean letter from the fire,
Okay.
from the
So
fire rescue department.
They're gonna comply with
Yes,
whatever the fire
absolutely.
department wants.
So is this above and beyond what the battalion chief has requested? What you're proposing to do, to have one line go in terms of what they had said were issues on the page We'll have one from Mr. Sponheimer.
So that is addressing comment number 2, where he says the fire hydrants shall be looped and not located on a dead end as shown. So the plan currently showed them as dead ends, and we are looping the service.
Okay, so this is above and beyond what he had requested you guys to do? Or
This is what he is requesting us
This
to do.
is, okay.
Yes.
That's where, because you said this is not what he had asked for, I think originally, so I'm just kind of,
Okay.
make sure I'm hearing exactly what you're saying.
Okay, if we go back to page 3, you have the stormwater management ordinance, and your post-development is less than the pre-development in terms of,
That's correct. With each of the 6-year storm designs, we are, notwithstanding the existence of what I'll call relatively recent stormwater management facilities existing on the property, still able to further reduce the post-development flows off the site in both, or all the 2, 5, 10, 25, 50, and 100-year storms. That's correct.
any other questions, ladies and gentlemen?
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead.
On page 4 from the Bucks County Planning Commission, the parking space design, number 8, they have a question about the 15 angled parking spaces in front of the proposed building. These spaces have no curbing or curb stops to prevent the driver from pulling straight through into the adjacent space. Is that being addressed?
And that deals, excuse me, with these 15 spaces right here. As you can see, they would be head-to-head right here, so
Okay.
curb stops.
We're not proposing any curb stops. They're both a tripping hazard and a snow maintenance issue for plowing and just clearing snow out around them. So in a development like this, where it's age restricted, we would not be proposing those.
Okay, because there's no, I don't see any feedback for that one. That's what I was asking in terms of that.
How do you prevent the cars running into each other?
The parking stalls are sized accordingly that, in most cases, there's not an issue with overhang, and a typical driver should be able to park within the stall space provided.
They'll be striped and sized appropriately. So.
But are they abutting each other? Is that right? They're abutting each other, right?
Correct.
With respect to this limited area, yes, you have angled spaces heading in here and angled spaces heading in here, where, yes, there would be, just like in probably every grocery store, department store, parking field that you can imagine, would have just line spaces heading into one another. Hence, everyone always, wanting to pull through on those spaces. So,
But this is senior assisted living, is that correct?
no, independent living. There's
Oh,
no
it's independent living?
no level of care provided. It would be exclusively independent living. Yes. So, but yes, 62 and older. Yes, but no level of care being provided.
Do you ever think of putting those, what's that, I think the correct name is the pollards, where they have the concrete pipe separating each?
That would certainly address the tripping hazard, but again, you still have the snow plowing issue there, where you wouldn't be, you'd have, all the snow would effectively be pushed, and you'd lose 15 spaces every time you had to plow that area, probably even more if you're using it as a snow bank, really. But it's not only the tripping hazard, which admittedly would probably be addressed by the bollards, but also the snow plow maneuvering and other, emergency service maneuvering, all those maneuverings that would be affected by those types of, that delineation between those two parking spaces, or aisles, excuse me.
And if you did add anything as such, I would imagine it would reduce the parking, potentially.
Certainly at a stall size that it currently, because if you think it's gonna, well.
It could.
It could, yes.
If you had to make adjustments in order to make it work in a manner that would be,
It would certainly shorten the length of the usable area of each one of those stalls, yes.
So I have one question. You're putting, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, no.
Where are we going?
No, no.
You have 60 units going up,
Correct.
and how many parking spots does that require?
There's 47 spaces for the existing 60 and 44 for the proposed 60. So for a total of 91, which is compliant with the parking for this use.
But they're two separate developments? Is there a cross, an
It's-
agreement between the both for?
There's no
parking?
subdivision proposed. It would be one lot. For all intents and purposes, it would be the same use. It would be one lot. There's no subdivision being proposed. So there's no reason to cross ease the properties. I think it logical and reasonable to expect the units, the residents of the new units to use the more closely situated new parking spaces and the existing units to continue to use theirs. But they've been operating this exact model with 47 spaces and feel that 44 for the exact same additional 60 units is going to be more than adequate,
So-
and it complies with the zoning
So if
requirements.
somebody, if there's 60 units and there's 60 cars, and you have 44 parking spots, how does that work?
Maybe Shoshana can speak more intelligently to the demand that they see with their residents and the parking.
Good evening. We have a parking permit system, and at our current building that is constructed on the site, we do not fill up the parking lot. We're a nonprofit, and we provide van transportation to our residents, and so a lot of people, when they move into our properties, choose to no longer have a car and utilize our van transportation, and so across our entire portfolio, we don't see a one-to-one parking ratio.
I understand that, but if you guys sell it and somebody else buys it, and they rent 60 units, and all 60 units have minimum one car, if you have husband and wife, it could be two cars. I just don't understand how that works. That would, Phil, for what they're doing, it should be at least one spot per unit, I would think.
Well, it's similar to, like, when we have an age-restricted community or something like that, there's always less parking associated with it because there's just not the frequency of use. And so what they're doing is compliant with zoning, compliant with the industry standard associated with that. Part of the reason we don't just do that is because if we add more spaces or change the ordinance, it's because of the impervious coverage, the effect on water and stormwater and so forth. So we often ask for our performance standards associated with things. When we do something like that, it means we ask them, tell us what the rest of your communities do and what is likely to kind of back up what they're proposing, and that's what they did here.
Right, and that's their community. If they sell that community to somebody else, they could do something completely different than what they do there, is what I'm asking.
Well, certainly, but again, if they sold it and it was a different use, they'd have to come back in.
It could be the same use.
Well, the same use would generally be characteristically the same associated with the use in the parking.
But their standards might be different for what that company uses and what that company does. Not every one of them have the same standards throughout the state of Pennsylvania, United States of America. I'm sure that there's different standards for each one. So we're basing it upon what they're saying they're going to do and what's going to happen, without considering the future and what happens if somebody else buys it and they have a different thought on, how they rent their units and how they conserve things. I'm just asking.
No, I understand that, but the parking standards associated with that are based upon some traffic engineering reports. You might have heard us talk about ITE standards regarding trip generation and things like that are based upon national studies. It's the same with parking. And parking for an age-restricted type of development like this is industry standards lower. Are there exceptions? Yes, there could be some exceptions to that sort of thing. But by and large, it's generally what it is. It's reflected on the plan.
But you understand why I'm asking the question?
Of course.
Because we can't just look at what you're doing, because companies sell things to other companies. They sell their companies to other companies. If their standards are the same, and you have 60 cars, you have 44 parking spots, and you have 60 units over here with 49 parking spots, where are all those other cars going to park? Are they going to go to other residential neighborhoods? Are they going to park in areas where they shouldn't be parked? There are things that we have to consider, and that's our job to consider that. So,
Understood. I would note that the required spaces for the site is 65. So per your ordinance, we are required to have a total, for both developments, both buildings, 65 spaces, which we exceed
What's the size of each unit and what's included in a unit?
They're two separate.
The first phase has mostly one-bedrooms and some two-bedrooms. That's already constructed. This building is all one-bedrooms, and that's a full apartment building. You got a kitchen, you got a living room, you got a bedroom, bathroom.
And it's about,
It's about
800 square foot?
Yeah, about 800 square foot.
okay, all right. I understand. And is any kind of community facilities attached to either one of these?
Each of the individual buildings has a community room with a community kitchen, and this property, I think, will also have a small patio.
I know the existing one has some outdoor features, right?
Yeah. In the parking lot on the first phase too, there's a gazebo and some outdoor sitting areas, and then where Chris is highlighting now, there's going to be a proposed patio.
And I see that your trash is all being kept inside the building? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, any other questions that we have? Did he answer your question, John?
Yeah, I just wanted it on the record, that's all.
Okay, is anyone would like to come forward to comment on this proposal? Not seeing anyone come forward, I ask for a motion to be put on the floor for the Federation Housing Incorporated.
I'd like to make a motion to table. Item 8, consideration of preliminary land development for further consideration.
Do we have a second on that?
I'll second the motion.
We have a second on the motion. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
All those against?
Nay.
Nay. Nay here. So it's a 2-2. Pass. Do I hear another motion to be put on the floor? I'm sorry. No other motions to be put on the floor? Mr. Pazza, you're going to have to advise me on this one?
Well, in the absence of a motion to approve the application, and I'm looking to see what our timeline is under the municipality's planning code. And I'm not seeing it. So,
I had the expiration in January.
there was an extension granted to move us out to this date, but Joe, I don't know how.
Yeah, I'm
farther
sure we
beyond
didn't make
this?
it to this point without an extension. I'm not sure how
Certainly.
much further it lasts, though, or is valid for.
So I'd say perhaps the applicant would ask, particularly since we're a board member short this evening, perhaps the applicant of its own accord will ask that the matter be tabled to your next council meeting to afford it the opportunity to circle the wagons with the township's professional staffs and perhaps see if we can address whatever questions or issues that the members of council have. And if that's what your intention would be, and we'll put on the record the extension of time under the MPC, we can come back in a couple of weeks when the fifth council member will be here, and also that whatever the lingering questions might be can be addressed.
Could you extend this to March 27th, just in case It
The
can't make it on-
13th, I think, is
Well, the 13th will be our next
the next meeting, and then I'm
But the
assuming
following, the
27th would
27th, just
take it.
to give you leeway to make sure you're in good shape.
Assuming my client is amenable, I don't see any difference between the 13th and the 27th.
Exactly.
Can we potentially get some direction as to what we should expect to plan to address at the next meeting, so that it's not,
I just have a few questions. I'd like to investigate the parking a little bit further. We're discussing a property that's set up as an apartment style. I want to understand what the future use could be, and I think we just need to make further considerations based on what you've presented to us.
You are willing to extend it, so you can put your motion back on the floor if you want to continue it till, make it, what do you want to make it?
March
13th?
Well,
13th or 27th?
Did you want to go 13th, I would assume?
Let's table it to a date certain of March 13.
Right.
Applicant will grant us an extension of time to the MPC through and including March 31st. And then, if for whatever reason we're not able to hit the March 13th meeting date, either because the questions haven't been answered or because at this point, the agenda, I believe, for the 13th is getting quite full, so it may be the 27th.
and Mr. Murphy will be here that eve, the 13th anyway, so
Well, then we'll try to make it the 13th then.
that would be appreciated. And if there's,
Only
yeah,
Okay.
that would be acceptable. That would be the request of the applicant, rather, to table consideration, and applicant will grant the necessary extensions of any and all timeframes under the MPC or elsewhere to accommodate that extension.
Michelle, you want to put that in form of a motion? I'm
Can I
sorry.
make- Yeah, I just want to make one comment.
Absolutely.
We have a need for this type of housing for residents. Don't have a lot of senior housing, so there's needs for this to have there. So it's just a matter of answering all the questions, have the full board here so that you get the full vote and everything goes square.
Understood. And if there are questions that can be relayed through either Mr. Pizzo or Mr. Warsa, to us so that we can be prepared to address those, please do, so that we can, speak intelligently to the concerns that you do have.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you'll be contacting Mr. Pizzo, and he'll have the opportunity to speak to us in terms of anything that we would like to address. You good? So we have a motion on the floor then?
Motion to table item number 8, consideration of preliminary land development until March 13th.
13th. Okay, we have a motion on the floor?
Second it.
Second on the motion, all those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Any against, any abstentions? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One thing while here. I don't know if you called for public comment, but there may be someone in the audience who wants to speak this evening who may not be able to make the next meeting, so if you
Okay,
wanted to
well, it was
just
tabled,
ask.
so I didn't ask for public comment, but I certainly can.
Yeah, just,
All right, so
Just
anyone
in
like to
case.
come forward and offer any public comment on this proposal? Not seeing anyone this evening, we will continue that until the March 13th date. Thank you very much. Let's leave that there. Okay, I want to move on to agenda item number 10. This is a consideration of a reduction of permit fees for Bensalem High School, 4319 Humeville Road. And
so these
Joe
are,
Subio?
certainly, yes. So this is an annual event with the township and the school district. They're doing their, the annual inspections, and as part of that, a new fire alarm system is going in at the property at 4319 Humeville. I'm not sure which school that is, but it's one of the many on Humeville. Is it the high school? Okay, I didn't see that. Consistent with township policies and ordinances, they have requested 50% waiver of the township's fees. The township has calculated those fees at $478.50. 50% reduction is $241.50. If council is of a mind to grant the request, that would be the motion.
ladies and gentlemen, your pleasure.
I'll put a motion in to grant the request for a reduction of fees for 4319 Humble Road, Bensalem High School, from $478.50 to $241.50.
So we do have a motion on the floor. I need a second.
Second?
All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
And against? That's unanimous? No abstentions? Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item number 11. We have A and B on that. Quentin, I'm going to ask you to come up and make sure that we have these numbers correct. Let's take A first, okay?
As soon as I hand out these real quick. These are.
Is it yours? All right, the first one is Raising Cane, LD, 3617 Horizon Boulevard.
Correct.
Tax map parcel is 02001.
Thank you, sir.
018-028.
So this is a release of escrow of $625,000, $625,364.25. This is their first release. We are holding couple line items, portion of a couple line items for some punch list work that's being completed at this time, plus the contingency just guaranteeing that we have enough money in escrow. So there's still, I believe it's on your memo, I don't have a copy with me, but I believe there's another $30,000 and change, I believe, on this one.
33, 515, 650.
I have 69,000. Where
I
were
forget which one's which, so bear with me on that. I don't have one.
A is Kane.
Raising Cane's, right. I don't have the copy of the memo in front of me, sorry.
we? Okay,
So there is some money that's for, there's a drain that's got to be converted over to actually an unlocked lid because that's not been working well. And also there's some plantings that were done that we can't verify, but they assure us that they are. We're waiting for the springtime for them to germinate, come up, and if that's all good, we'll be in here for a final release in the next couple of weeks for this project.
69,000 is enough to do that.
Yeah,
and so you were recommending $625,364.25.
correct.
Okay. Mr. Phil? Worcester?
Yes. Accurate.
Okay, fine. And this will be subject to auditor's review. So with that, I would accept the motion to be put on the floor.
So moved.
We have a motion on the floor to accept.
I'll second.
We have a second on the motion. All those in favor signify with an aye. Aye. Any against, any abstentions, unanimous? Okay, and the second one is McDonald's LD, 1930 Street Road, 02-0430-016 and 02-043-018-001. Okay, that's you McDonald's. I don't see a difference between you.
No, they're exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Okay.
basically, this is another first release for the project. We're still waiting on one item to be taken care of. We have a couple of arborvitaes in the back. I think there's 6, from what I remember, out of the 30 that were planted. They're showing decline or have already died. We're waiting for that now to be replaced. We're assuming in the very early spring it should be done. So we've held $33,000 to get those plants taken care of. So once that's been done, we will be back in front for a full release of the remaining $33,515 and 55 cents.
Okay, any questions on that, ladies and gentlemen?
I do have one question. I was
Go
in
ahead.
there, I don't know, a month, 2 ago, and they've fixed the paving? They've repaved the entire parking lot?
They did,
Maybe it was a couple months ago, I don't remember.
Yeah.
I just know, I was like, ooh.
There
It's
was
ugly.
a portion of the existing McDonald's that wasn't supposed to be touched. But during the project, that back area, I guess, was paved. That wasn't supposed to be done as part of this project, but there was no permits for, what we require permits for is it's just resurfacing. So that was all done as part of the project, just extended out, I guess. a little
Because it was pretty, bad back there, so.
bit. The existing area is still bad.
exist-
Yeah, there's still some areas that are still existing from the original project, like the original project that wasn't required to be redone at all. But I would say just around the immediate building itself was supposed to be done as part of the original land development that was approved by council. We extend, the contractors asked, and we authorized that for the work to be done in the rear. The parking area going up toward Humeville Road's exit, I guess, or access, that area was not touched. So that's just more of a maintenance issue for the property owner at this point. So if there's any potholes out there, I couldn't tell you because I've not been on site.
Are you fine?
I didn't realize the whole thing would not be repaved.
Yeah, really?
I mean, you would expect for a project of that size that they would, part of
You
the
would think they would
requirement,
do
we
all
would
of it.
have required to repave the entire thing. So,
For some reason, it was not a part of the original land development for some reason. I'm not sure why.
I'll make a motion that we approve as presented with the subject to audit by the finance company.
We have a motion on the floor?
I'll second.
We have a second on the motion? All those in favor signify with an aye. Aye. Any against? Abstentions? Unanimous. Okay, thanks. Fine. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 12. This is going to be public comment. Anyone like to come up and discuss?
Hi,
Hello?
my name's Natasha. Everybody knows me, I think, by now. 2047 Hansel Drive. So per your request, we are holding your feet to the fire. Since the last time we met, you guys were gonna do some, I guess, work to figure out about the whole sewage thing, etc. So have you guys,
Yeah, we do have some information for you. I want to start with our solicitor, Joe Pizzo, if you'd be kind enough to address all the issues that we had, the administration had addressed, and see where we are with you, okay? And then we have Quentin here also to answer any specific questions. Mr. Pizzo, please.
Certainly. So at your council meeting in January, the residents came forward to express concern and some questions regarding a sanitary sewer overflow that occurred in the property behind the homes on Hansel Drive, the former Armstrong Middle School property. Following the meeting, a significant amount of time has been spent by the township, the mayor's office, building and planning office, township engineer's office, and my office to get our arms around what happened, as well as the other questions that came up during the last council meeting. So as to the sanitary sewer overflow, on January 17, the township was made aware that morning by representatives of Bucks Water and Sewer that they had received a complaint the evening prior, I believe from residents regarding a septic smell, sewage smell coming from the Armstrong property. Our understanding from meetings and discussions with representatives of Bucks Water and Sewer, and I should also say, not only has all the entities that I mentioned within the township building, we have had telephone conversations and meetings with Bucks Water and Sewer. We have had telephone conversations and email communications with the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, and we have had in-person meetings and telephone conversations with the ownership and management of Bucks Meadows Apartments. So all of that information goes into the narrative that I'll give you. Bucks was unable to make contact with anyone from Bucks Meadows on the evening of the 16th, so the morning of the 17th, contact was made with the township. Township went out to inspect the site. Township inspectors went out. Bucks Water and Sewer inspectors went out. DEP was contacted, and DEP was also on the scene that morning and observed a sanitary sewer overflow. Sewage was coming out of a manhole, which is part of a private line that flows through the Armstrong property from Bucks Meadows Apartments, ultimately connecting into a private or a public sewer line in Hansel Drive. The private line is owned and maintained by Bucks Meadows. Sewage was coming out of the manhole through vents in the manhole lid. The ownership from Bucks Meadows was made aware. They responded to the scene on the 17th as well. Since DEP had jurisdiction over what was happening, DEP coordinated efforts as to what was going to happen. The property owner, or not the property owner, I'm sorry, the Bucks Meadow folk were tasked with coming up with a means to address the overflow, as well as a cleanup of the overflow that had occurred in the area of the manhole. The Bucks Meadows retained a private plumbing contractor who came out on the following day, January 18, and jetted the line, essentially blew the line clean. It was determined that the line had been blocked with a buildup of grease, the grease believed to have come from the Bucks Meadows Apartments. The line was, as I said, flushed clean. Bucks County Water and Sewer, subsequent to that, inspected its line, determined that its line was clean as well. So the immediate problem of the blockage having been taken care of, DEP then tasked the ownership of Bucks Meadows with undertaking a cleanup of the site. The individuals from Bucks Meadows retained an environmental remediation contractor to come out on the site, and they were out on January 28th, performed a cleanup of the site, removed hazardous materials from the site, disposed of them off-site. Between the clearing of the blockage and the cleanup of the site, there were repeated and ongoing inspections of the area to make sure that the blockage did not recur and that sewage was no longer coming out of the line anywhere along the line. That was being done by maintenance staff from Bucks Meadows. Primarily, the township was also out there to do its own independent observations. The cleanup was, I believe, accomplished in its entirety on the 28th. During that day, DEP, it is our understanding, has signed off on the cleanup, and that the steps that were taken, which included, again, placing lime on the ground in the area that had been contaminated, removal of solids, removal of the fats and the greases, was all done to DEP satisfaction. The incident remains an open incident, however, while DEP awaits a plan from Bucks Meadows as to how they intend to maintain the line going forward, so that there is not a recurrence of the blockage. The plan that Bucks Meadows is proposing to DEP includes routine maintenance of, or routine inspection of the manholes, all of the manholes and the sewer line on a monthly basis, a jetting of the line at least once a year to make sure that it does not, blockage does not reoccur. In meeting with the inspectors from the township, it was recommended to management of Bucks Meadows that they also employ some form of a degreaser, that be installed in there or placed into the sewer line back at the apartment complex on a monthly basis. That was a recommendation that came from Bucks Water and Sewer and was passed on to Bucks Meadows by the township, who agreed with the recommendation. And Bucks Meadows intends to include that in the plan that they are submitting to DEP. The other recommendation that the township made to Bucks Meadows is some form of tenant education to see what can be done to school the residents on not placing certain items into garbage disposals, particularly items that will result in a grease buildup in the laterals in the complex and that sewage line, as well as things like baby wipes or sanitary wipes that are placed into toilets that, while they are flushable, really do not degrade and end up just contributing to the blockage of the line. They were agreeable to undertaking that sort of an educational step as well. So that has that plan, I believe, by now has been submitted to DEP, and we're waiting for confirmation back from DEP and Bucks Meadows that remediation, or not that remediation plan, that maintenance plan going forward is one that is acceptable. We were advised by Bucks Water and Sewer that they routinely inspect their line in Hansel Drive. I believe they inspect it every couple of months, and they flush it several times a year. And so it was our recommendation to Bucks Meadows that since Bucks jets the public line multiple times a year, that perhaps Bucks Meadows will want to jet the private line multiple times a year. And based on the discussions with both entities, it was requested that Bucks Meadows coordinate with Bucks Water and Sewer so that the lines are being flushed at the same time. What that will help to do, among other things, is keep anything that might be being pushed out of the sewer line, the private sewer line, into the public sewer line. We'll keep moving it downstream into the larger line in Street Road, and we won't be just pushing a problem from one point to another. Bucks Meadows was agreeable to that, and they are contacting Bucks Water and Sewer to coordinate the scheduling for those inspections. So insofar as the sewage overflow goes, two other things that were done on February 22nd, Bucks Meadows had its plumbing contractor go out and televise the private sewer line. So what they did was shoot from one end to the other to see if there were anything else that might be, A, to make sure that the line continued to be clear, which we're told that's what the televising showed, but secondly, to establish that the line is in fact intact, that there are no collapsed areas, as was concerned that may be the case during your earlier meeting, and to see if we could see any other points of sewage coming into the line beyond just Bucks Meadows. We are advised that the televising shows that the line is intact from point A to point B, and that it is clear. Bucks Meadows has agreed to provide us with the video of the televising, as well as the report from the plumbing contractor when those come in. Again, those were just done back on the 22nd. On the 21st, the plumbing contractor, in advance of blowing out televising the line, came out and did another jetting of the line, as well as an inspection and a clean out of grease from any of the manholes themselves, the elevated part above the line. So to the extent that the residents may have picked up a septic smell last week, we believe that it would have been caused by the plumbing contractor being back out there, jetting the line and cleaning out the manholes a second time during the week of the 21st. So if there was an occurrence of the septic smell, and we did hear from the residents by way of a news reporter that they had were getting the smell again, that we believe is what the cause would have been. We have had people out routinely on the property on Hansel Drive continuously since the council meeting of January to make sure that we're not picking up any sort of a septic smell or a sewer smell in the area, and obviously to make sure that we're not seeing anything coming out of the manhole. I can say that in each and every event that a township employee or a township inspector has been out in the area, either on Hansel Drive or the Armstrong property, no evidence of any sewage overflows since the incident back on the 17th, and no odor being detected. So that would be, I believe, everything as far as the sewer overflow incident goes. During the meeting of the 26th, there was also concern raised about the condition of a dumpster area in the rear of the property. Township immediately contacted Bucks Meadows the next day. The area was cleared out within days of the township speaking to Bucks Meadows. Our inspectors went out and verified that the site was cleaned up, again, within days. I apologize, I don't have the exact day, but within days of the township going out and asking them to do so. During our meeting with them earlier this month, we obviously asked them to make sure that that continues to be the case, that they please be diligent in maintaining that area in a cleaned up area and not allowing things to accumulate outside of the dumpsters. Questions were raised during the council meeting in January regarding the fencing on the Armstrong property. I conferred with Building and Planning. They've gone back and reviewed the demolition permit requirements. At this point in time, the demolition permit has been closed. The fencing is permitted to remain but is not required to remain. So to the extent that it is there, and I believe that the property owner has been continuing to try and keep the driveway entrances fenced off to keep people from going onto the property. But insofar as a requirement that the property continue to be fenced, such is no longer the case, insofar as that goes. Question was raised regarding the presence of the construction debris on the property. The inspectors went back out, double-checked what was there. To the extent, as I anticipated during the January meeting, to the extent that there is debris that remains, and at this point the only debris that remains is, I'm told, crushed concrete, is that correct? Or the broken bits of concrete, which are permitted to be used as fill at such time as construction takes place on the property. So that is permitted to remain there so long as it's not otherwise creating any sort of a problem. Were it something that required stabilization, like a pile of dirt, which we've heard about many times at a different location in the township, that would require stabilization under DEP regulations and County Conservation District regulations. Such is not the case for the construction debris that remains on the property at this point. We still have no indication from the developer as to when construction might begin on the property, so it is anybody's guess at which point in time those sorts of activities might begin, but nothing is certainly imminent, and no permit applications or building plans have been submitted to the township. The township has re-inspected the storm sewer from the detention basin on the Armstrong property into Hansel Drive and down Hansel Drive to where it crosses Street Road, has found it to be clear, has found it to be intact, has found it to be free and clear of sewage or anything that might have gone through it during the sewage overflow. Everything is functioning properly there, and it is not a source of any problems at this juncture. I spoke with Bucks Water and Sewer and our plumbing inspector regarding a requirement for a grease trap at the apartment complex. That was a source of some conversation during the council meeting. As I anticipated during the January meeting, the Township Plumbing Code, which we follow the International Plumbing Code, does not require grease traps for residential properties, including apartment complexes. Bucks Water and Sewers regulations do not require them. The townships, there are no township regulations that require them. That being said, during our meetings and conversations with the owners of Bucks Meadows, we asked them to at least give that some consideration for the installation of a grease trap on the property as a means of perhaps tackling the problem from a different direction. They said that they would look into that, but in the short term anyway, their plan is to monitor, inspect, degrease, flush the line, and do that in concert with Bucks Water and Sewer at various intervals throughout the year. Again, they have agreed to provide us with records of when that's being done, and to provide us access to go ahead and pull the manholes ourselves, so that we can verify that everything is functioning as it should be. Our people were out as recently as Friday or today for smell, but also to pull the manholes. So Friday of last week, we had our people out to pull the manholes along the line and confirm that the sewage was flowing and flowing freely, and that it was, and there was no evidence of significant grease buildup during the period that had transpired since the line had last been flushed. We did talk with the Bucks Water and Sewer and Bucks Meadows both about whether they thought that either of the school properties, Snyder Middle School or Rush Elementary School, might be flowing into that line without anyone realizing it, and that may be an additional source of grease into the line. The sewer records that we have, coupled with discussions with both entities indicate that that is not the case. That, the televising may show something different, but it doesn't sound like it's going to. So it would appear that everything that's going into that line is coming solely from Bucks Meadows and flowing from point A to point B, where it connects into the Bucks County water and sewer line. I think that's everything that we touched on. Check valves. There was some discussion about check valves during the last council meeting. So I spoke with Bucks Water and Sewer. Bucks has, in those instances where there has been a sewage overflow, or a sewage backup rather, in the past, from their line out in Hansel Drive into one of the homes, Bucks has, as part of its cleanup of the property, included the opportunity to have a check valve installed at those homes. As to the remaining homes in Hansel Drive at this point that do not have them, Bucks does not believe that at this juncture check valves would be necessary, and it would very likely be an unnecessary expense for the homeowners. If the homeowners wanted to have them installed, they certainly could, and depending on whether the house has a basement and whether the sewer lines are accessible from inside the house versus having to put something in the yard, would change the cost significantly. But between their ongoing maintenance of the line, in this instance where there was a blockage of the private line, there was no resultant problems in the public line. And again, as soon as Bucks was made aware of the overflow there, that they were monitoring what was going on in the public line as well. So they're not telling everybody not to, but on the other hand, again, they believe at this point, and I don't want to speak for them, but it would seem to be an expense probably right now that is not warranted based on conditions as they exist in 2023.
Conditions of the sewage lines?
The condition of the public sewage line, yes.
Not the private. So.
Well, they have no control over the private sewage line.
But we should, and I don't understand why we can't press them to put in grease traps. We have restaurants that have to have, and this place has a constant problem of this grease problems, which is going to the residents on Hansel Drive. Why can't we force them to do this, not ask them to be nice guys and do it? Because it's going into a private line, not into a public line where it could be watched and could be handled. I know they're agreeing to do this, that, and the other thing, but why can't I haven't heard any other apartment complex in Bensalem that has grease problems like this does, and it's a constant problem with Bucks Meadows. So how can we solve that and make them do that so that we protect the neighbors on Hansel Drive? Is there a way?
In talking with our plumbing inspectors and with the personnel from Bucks Water and Sewer, the answer is essentially whatever we're talking about, be it routine maintenance, degreasing, flushing, whether it's installing a grease trap, it still requires some ongoing maintenance by the property owner.
Right.
Just installing a grease trap in and of itself doesn't necessarily solve the problem. And Quentin can share with you that, there are one or two restaurants in the township where we have a recurring problem because they have a grease trap, but they don't maintain it.
But should we have an ordinance that put in that ordinance that they have to do cleanup at each, like we do inspections on the building? Shouldn't we have something that we inspect these places or grease traps that might be at issue down there. I'm just looking at, here we're looking at the residents on Hansel Drive, and they need to be protected. But other neighborhoods can happen now with the restaurants and things like that. How can we protect the residents and other businesses in our township from one business destroying their property, destroying their businesses and so forth? Is there something we can look into and maybe figure out if there's a way that we can do it legally?
Well, in regard to businesses, those that are required to have grease traps, I don't want to say absolutely do every business in the township, but to the best of our knowledge, those that need them have them. And by and large, the businesses in the township that have them maintain them properly. So to the extent that we're protecting the community, that we're protecting residents, that we're protecting the environment, by and large, for those non-residential properties where grease traps are required, where we can mandate them, they're there. And they are by and large being properly maintained by those businesses. As far as the apartment complexes go, it would require this township taking some sort of action mandating it for all of the apartments in the township. In talking with the people who are out there in the field, the people in the building and planning department, that the problem that we have in Bucks Meadows is to some extent unique. That's not that all of the apartment complexes don't generate some amount of grease, they do. And by and large, most of them are taking care of their facilities to keep it from building up. In many or most cases, you don't have this sort of a long sewage line from the apartment complex to the public line through what is essentially, for the last decade or more, a vacant field, where this grease is able to build up the way it does. We had a problem, I'm told, with one other complex in the township of a significant size. I don't see the need to bring their name up publicly because they've gone about addressing the problems that that they were having to the township's satisfaction. And again, one of the larger ones, so that'll give you an idea of which one I might be speaking of. The Bucks Meadows on the other side of Knights Road flows directly into a sewer line in Knights Road. They're not having the problem on that side that the buildings on the other side of Knights Road are. And again, it all goes that way because that's the way gravity's taking it. But there's not a belief, and I don't want to speak for the director of building and planning, for your plumbing inspector, for your apartment inspector, for your engineers, but I don't believe that anyone, particularly in going and talking about what happened at Bucks Meadows to the degree we have for the last month, I don't think that anyone believes right now that putting in an ordinance that would require grease traps at all 30-plus apartment complexes in the township at a significant cost to all of them is necessarily something. It seems to be a solution in search of a problem in most cases, as to grease coming out of the apartment complexes. If it's what council wants to do, obviously it's what council wants to do. But to the extent you're asking, is it something that the people who are dealing with these issues on a daily basis on your behalf believe to be necessary? I think the answer largely is no.
Okay, what I'm asking is why can't we be proactive and start looking? Because this happened again and again there. They're agreeing to something, but what happens if it stops being done? I think we need to be proactive, especially with this one facility.
So back to your point for the length of the sewer. Where does the private and the public start, do you know?
I believe the public line is in Hansel Drive.
So across
from the
Armstrong property is
from-
private that Bucks Meadows is responsible for?
Correct.
Can I just add something to what you guys were saying? First off, thank you so much for the answers. I think we got more than I think we thought we were gonna get. But when I had the sewer back up into my house, the biggest problem is that those drains are not big enough to take on what they take on. And then they get clogged because there are grease things and stuff just happens in there. But those pipes are not big enough. They're also terracotta, so they're not upgraded. So that's one of the biggest issues. When I had the sewer backing up into my house, the clog was on Street Road. It wasn't even on Hansel Drive. The smell that comes from back there, that's from the Bucks Meadows. So we're just getting hammered with both ends, basically.
I have a few questions. If you don't mind. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's okay. And then in terms of their plan, they're providing a plan for maintenance. Who is reviewing and approving that plan? DEP?
DEP.
And then who is responsible to ensure that they continue to do that plan? Because what they say and what they do could be two different things, and that's my concern.
I am assuming that, and would be consistent with the way this is typically handled by DEP, that they have to, A, give DEP, this is what we're going to do, and then they have to establish to DEP that they are in fact doing it for some period of time following DEP approving the plan. We have also asked them to provide us with evidence that it's being done as well. So when that evidence ceases to arrive, we'll know to go out and follow up.
But since we don't have an ordinance for this, we cannot necessarily enforce it once their time with DEP is done. We have no,
As far as the maintenance, you mean?
as far as the maintenance, nothing to fall back on to enforce the fact that they're not providing us with information on the maintenance.
There wouldn't be an ordinance that would require that. Essentially, to the extent that what occurred were to occur again, or were things happening that we believe were going to lead to another sewage overflow, we then start to get into our ability to exercise our police powers for health, safety, and welfare. So, but that's when we, we're now putting the rabbit in the hat to a certain extent, because we're assuming, okay, they're not doing it, and we're assuming that something's going to happen. And again, we want to be proactive. We don't want to, just as the police do on the other side of the building, we're trying to stop crimes before they happen, not respond to them after they do. And so, as I said a month ago, the unfortunate aspect of this, these sorts of events don't happen on a daily basis in this community. No. They don't happen on a monthly basis. They really don't happen on a yearly basis. They are very few and far between. And had this manhole not been where it is, which is essentially in the middle of a great big field, where nobody's going by it on a regular basis, where nobody's going by it ever, quite candidly.
No, the problem is that sewage water seeped into the storm system.
I understand it, but what I'm saying is that if a manhole were overflowing here in Hansel Drive or in Street Road, somebody would see it. You'd see it right away, and it would be responded to right away. Here, regrettably, and you don't want it to happen anywhere, but to the extent that it did, this is where it was happening. We're a good distance from the houses. They're not. You folk aren't walking back there on a daily basis, I'm assuming. And anybody who's walking around on there who isn't the property owner or Bucks Meadows is trespassing. And so, to the extent that their people are now committed to going out and routinely walking these manholes, But for that, nobody would otherwise have known that this problem was happening until, as you did, until you spelled it.
Well, so, to be honest with you, the people that maintain that sewage line are the residents of Hansel Drive, because we call Bucks County Water and Sewage on a regular basis. The minute I smell anything, I call them, because I know there's something's backing up somewhere. And they come out, they always knock on my door and say, everything's clear, we look through everything, and I'm like, okay, well then I don't know, but it smells. And they go, and they agree with me, so I'm not like hallucinating this. Eventually, they found that problem. How, I have no idea, but they found it, and they approached us and said, look, your lines are clear, but this is where the problem is coming from. The problem is that it's going into the stormwater, which then comes behind my house, and that is probably why I am smelling it, right? Because that's where all the stormwater accumulates.
Well, again,
what I'm
with all due respect, since the event, again, a reputable environmental remediation company acceptable to DEP went out and cleaned the site.
No, and I understand that.
And we've had people out, the Bucks Water and Sewer has had people out repeatedly since the event, looking, trying to identify the smell, trying to identify where there might still be an issue. And not only are we not seeing it, we're also not smelling it. And that includes the reporter who was out there to interview all of you a week ago Friday. She closes her news story with, I don't smell anything.
That is correct, but you know what? She didn't go there when it was smelling. That smell started on Sunday, and it continued. I didn't call anybody. I didn't call that reporter. She came on her own because she read an article on the Patch. So she decided to come out and do the story. But next time it smells, I'll call one of you guys. You guys can go back there and smell it. That's fine by me, because it's going to happen again. The worst part is that summer is coming, and we already have a mosquito infestation. So wait until the summertime comes, the big yard that I thought I was going to enjoy.
I have a few questions, please. Thank you, first of all, for your thorough account of all of this. I mean, it's a lot of information, and I appreciate that you were able to get so much done for us in this time. I do have a couple of questions and maybe need a little clarification on a few items, please. She mentioned the piping and the sizing of the piping. Do we know, first of all, if the piping is currently up to code?
It's not.
Well, you're talking piping, we're talking about a lot of piping.
Yeah, so the line that's getting backed up, a private line, is it up to code? If it's not, how can we remediate that?
I can tell you that, and again, up to code is sort of it has various connotations.
Okay.
To the best of our knowledge, and again, once we get the televising, we'll be able to independently confirm. What we can tell you is there was clearly, when we were out there, evidence that the sewer line has surcharged in the past, because there's evidence of grease in the various manholes. It has been cleaned by the plumbing contractor since this event. So that should help with whatever odor problem existed. It appears at the moment that that the line holds what is going through it, and that everything is going through it freely. We can only assume that at the time the apartment complex was constructed, the piping was sized for what was being built. So I don't believe that there's any evidence. No one in all that we've done here, no one has suggested that the line is undersized.
Okay.
No one has suggested that is something that needs to be done. No one has suggested that the line, I think it's been suggested that perhaps the line might be compromised. But again, everything that we know as of February 27th is that the line is intact, that it is operating, that it is clear. the televising will be the final bit of evidence that we need. But so all of that being said, I don't know what the size of the Bucks Meadow line is, and I don't know what the size of the Bucks Water and Sewer line is, and I don't know what the size of the line in Street Road is. But theoretically, you typically have a smaller line dumping into a larger line, dumping into a larger line. So again, Bucks certainly isn't saying that the Bucks Meadow line is too large, what's coming into Hansel Drive. So in all the things that we've talked about in this past month in getting ready for this evening's meeting, one of them is not that the lines are not adequately sized.
Okay.
It all appears to be an issue of maintenance and upkeep, and not that the facilities are in disrepair or insufficient for their suited purposes.
Okay, my next question. You talked about the current plumbing code being up to the standard of the national code. Mr. Polari spoke on this a little bit, and you said that it really wouldn't be appropriate to do so, to have a mandate on all apartments, for example. Is there a reason why there would have to be a mandate on all, and that this couldn't be a discretionary ordinance in the event that there were a critical issue that the township had to address, such as this, where we could take action further to be, I guess, more proactive and it's not really proactive, it's reactive, but we would be able to take, I guess, our approach in a quicker manner and have a plan in place such as what you discussed with the maintenance plan and make recommendations and then actually implement them and hold them accountable to it.
The answer to your question, I don't think, is one that anybody, that Quentin or Phil or I could answer for you tonight, because I think it would require us to consult with engineers who deal with this on a regular basis to advise us whether, I don't want to say the simple answer, but there would have to be some reason for us to distinguish between this apartment complex is required to have a grease trap and this apartment complex isn't.
Could it be the length of the private line?
Again, I'm sitting here and I'm saying I can't tell you what those standards would be, but at the end of the day, an apartment is a dwelling unit that has people living in it that, whether they're in a single-family house or in a multi-family, it's still people living, doing the things they do every day. So for us to distinguish between, say, Bucks Meadows and a smaller complex like maybe Elmwood Park or something smaller, we'd have to have some standard, because otherwise, we're somebody,
Right.
not unlike what we have with R55, somebody's going to challenge us that, well, he's got people living in apartments and I've got people living in apartments. I've got to put in $50,000 worth of grease trap for mine, and he doesn't have to put in anything. And, what makes me different than him? So that's where I need to get together with engineers and, probably the Water and Sewer Authority and our inspectors to come up with rationale, again, if the township wants to go down that road. And the answer may be there isn't one. It's just like taxes. When people say, well, I've put my kids through the school, or I'm a senior citizen, and why should I still have to pay school taxes?
Right.
And the answer is because state law says everybody who owns property pays school taxes. That's,
Yeah, I think my suggestion or my thought was that we could use our discretion in the event that we had a critical issue impacting our residents, such as this. So I'm not saying a blanket ordinance or or updating the code per se. I'm really just saying that at this point, what authority do we have to step in and move this along more quickly? But if we can look into something for that. The other thing was the valves, and I know you explained that very well, but in the beginning, when you were talking about the valves, I think that you mentioned that some homes might be eligible to have the valves installed, and would that be at the cost of Bucks County Water and Sewer because their property particularly was impacted?
And if I gave that impression, I certainly didn't mean to.
Okay.
What I was attempting to say is that there have in the past, and I think most recently it was during the 100-year storm, where along with everything else that affected some of the homes on Hansel Drive, the sanitary sewer backed up because there was nowhere else for the sanitary sewer to go. Bucks, as I understand it, through its insurance, it's participated in a cleanup and a remediation of the sewage overflow in those homes. And as one of the mechanisms, check valves were offered to be installed, and I believe ultimately were.
I'm sorry, I'm going to clarify that.
Please do, because I could be mistaken. But just to finish my point, as we sit here on February 27, 2023, what the Water and Sewer Authority has said to me, and again, I don't want to speak for them, but is that at this point, they believe that the line in Hansel Drive that all of the homes' laterals are connected to is clear, is functioning, and that the likelihood of a sewer backup in that line is no greater or less than any other public sewer line anywhere else in the township. That line in particular is probably less because it's getting greater attention, particularly since the 100-year storm. So it's getting maintained and it's getting inspected at a greater frequency than a lot of other public lines of the same type. So if a homeowner wanted to install one on his or her own, there's certainly no reason not to if that's an expense that the homeowner wanted to incur.
Okay.
But the authority isn't recommending, nor is it dissuading. It's just saying they don't believe that at this point the likelihood of a backup from their line into a home in 2023 warrants the expense. And again, depending on what you're installing and where it can be installed on your property, that also changes the cost. That if you had a basement in your house and it's somewhere where the plumber can easily access, that it's likely going to be significantly less expensive than if they have to dig up a sewer main in a basement or in a yard.
Okay, thank you.
So to clarify, that sewage backup did not happen during the 100-year storm. That backup happened in my house 2 weeks before that flood.
Okay.
So,
But it was pre the 100-year storm, and I'm
It was
saying
pre,
that
yeah, but the house-
since then, they're saying,
Okay.
it's,
so the houses that do have check valves had them because there was backup into their house. The only reason ours had a placement for it, we just did not have the valve. I don't
and a
know,
point of fact, yours then is the house where the authority says a check valve had been installed.
But there was no check
And apparently
valve.
had been removed by the prior owner sometime prior to you purchasing the house for reasons
luck.
no one understands. But for the prior owner of the house having removed the check valve, you likely would not have had the overflow because the check valve would have been in place.
Correct. So my question was to Bucks County Water and Sewage about that. Why can't you be proactive and install it in everybody's house? The answer was that the plumbers union had sued them over this because they want to do the installing, which means if we want to have a check valve installed, for example, Colleen's house does not have one, but if she wanted one, she would have to pay for it out of her own pocket. It's not that it doesn't necessarily, it's not gonna hit somebody else's house, but this is why we call them every so often to make sure that those lines are clean.
In defense of the plumbers union, I believe it was actually a group of plumbing contractors who sued the authority to keep them from doing
It's possible,
that
yeah.
kind of work on private property. But yes,
Correct. It's
you're correct.
possible. But because the property owner was not having to pay for any of that, and just so we're clear, my insurance had to kick in to fix what was damaged. The only thing Bucks County Water and Sewer paid for was the remediation,
Yeah,
which unfortunately then it didn't really matter because then the whole house was flooded, so it didn't really matter. But yeah, just to clarify on that with the check valve situation, but honestly, I encourage all of my neighbors to get one because I don't want them to go through what I went through. Coming home to sewage in your house is disgusting also.
Can I ask one more question?
water.
I'm sorry, you have one more?
Yeah. Did that. I have one final, because you know I like timelines. You talked about the maintenance plan. It's due, it's being reviewed. And I know you touched on this a little bit already. Is there a due date that we know of for it to be approved and an expectation of implementation of the plan? Date?
I believe that the plan, the date by which the plan had to be from Bucks Meadows to DEP has either by now passed, or it may be tomorrow, or, but it was in February, as I understand. DEP will deal with it in whatever time DEP deals with it. Now, I don't anticipate that for this particular matter it will be too long, but I don't want to speak for the DEP inspectors. But once DEP signs off, we'll know from DEP and we'll know from Bucks Meadows. And I should mention, and Quentin, again, if I've said anything that's inaccurate, please jump in and tackle me or something. But I believe that the DEP records for this incident are available online. That's correct?
Can we extend, did you want to answer your questions on all?
I know we don't know this answer because we have no indication of when the Armstrong property is going to be developed. But if and when that is ever developed, would that private line come into play and then become a public line? So Bucks County Water and Sewer would be part of their normal maintenance plan?
Very good question, and one that we asked. The developer does not have an approved sanitary sewer plan for the property yet. That is one of the requirements of your approval of the plan, and is a routine requirement that they have to get the approvals of both Aqua and Bucks Water and Sewer for the water and sewer for their properties. And just as in the case of this evening's agenda, item 5, which is a Act 537 Sewage Facilities Act plan revision, once the sanitary sewer plan is signed off on by Bucks Water and Sewer, then you would approve a 537 plan revision, which gets filed with DEP, which then makes the sanitary sewer facilities blessed at all levels of government. So at this point, they don't have a plan. In talking with the engineers, in all likelihood, that line will connect into the sanitary sewage facilities that get constructed for the Armstrong property, at which point in time they get constructed. It will very likely no longer go down near the Hansel Drive. They won't connect into it. They'll connect into sewage facilities on site, which everyone's telling me would connect directly into Street Road. So if the project ever happens, the likelihood is, I'd say, better probably than 90% that sewer line, at least a portion, the portion that ties into Hansel Drive, will be abandoned, and that sewage will flow into a different point on the Armstrong property where it will become part of the Armstrong sewage.
Okay, it's been a long couple days for me, so you have to forgive me. The DEP, when they're done, this is done. Is there a way that we can extend this after DEP's out of it, so all these things that are having to be done are in writing and have to be agreed to by the apartment complex to do this from here till eternity or until the lines are changed into other ones? Can we do that? Is that something that can be done?
Typically, for this kind of an event, Bucks Meadows will be required to sign some form of a consent decree with DEP. And the consent decree will be that whatever their maintenance plan is, that's what they are now going to do going forward for some, either forever or for some finite period of time. And they will have to establish to DEP that they're doing it. They've agreed to also establish for us that they're doing it. So once DEP puts a bow on this and we get the final report, which I'm assuming will include the consent decree or whatever sort of order DEP enters, we'll have that, we'll know it, and if we see that it's not being done, we can go to DEP and say, hey, DEP, they're not doing it, or they're not doing it the way they're supposed to.
Let me put this in perspective too. I think what the council is saying, and I could be wrong, correct me if I am, but I think what the council is saying that we would like to go back and go back and investigate, not investigate, but put in some type of either an ordinance, and I say that because that's not the right word, but put in some type of a restriction that every apartment in Bensalem needs to have a grease pit put into their complex. And with that, there has to be some type of a maintenance agreement that the apartments have to adhere to for here into the future. That's what I believe I hear anyway. If I'm wrong, let me know, but that's what I see.
Well, that's what we're talking about, but it didn't seem like it was something that we could do. Am I wrong?
Well, I think we can, but I know what you're saying. That's what I heard too.
Should we take that offline?
You're the council, you can do whatever you want.
Thank you.
Again, for something of that magnitude or that nature, if that's the route that you collectively want to go down, again, we can get together with the appropriate sewer engineers, together with our inspectors, both our apartment inspectors and our plumbing inspectors, with folk from Bucks Water and Sewer, because obviously they have a stake in the game, and see what, council having said, we want, if there is justification for it, it's what we want, then we'll go and look and see if there's justification.
I think there's a big difference between a commercial apartment building and, say,
Residents.
a duplex or a quad rental or something like that.
Can we take the private line out and have Bucks County Water and Sewer work something out with them to put especially if the new shopping center ever happens and they decide to do that, then that line's going to go nowhere.
Well, one of the things that was shared with Bucks Meadows, Bucks did offer to maintain the line. It would require the apartment complex to enter into a formal maintenance contract with them. It's something that I think the apartment complex might be amenable to, but at least at the point in time that we had the meeting, they had already taken several steps with their plumbing contractor to get things in place so that they could hand over a plan to DEP, so they may already be committed for the next 12 months anyway, that Wexler Plumbing is going to do certain things. That was sort of the vibe I got, and nothing more than that, but so that offer remains. Again, Bucks wants to work with them. Certainly when they're doing something to the private line, Bucks wants to be aware so that Bucks can be monitoring and, if necessary, doing the same thing to the public line, so that we don't have any issues that everything is flowing freely. If that ultimately leads to Bucks perhaps being responsible for the maintenance from not only Hansel Drive, but all the way up to the apartment complex, the Bucks does a wonderful job with all those sorts of things, so.
If
that
we
would
were to
certainly be a
consider this
plus.
ordinance, what I'm suggesting, I mean, it would have to be a numerical type thing where maybe it would be 50 apartments in the complex will be responsible to have a grease trap. Maybe it would be 100. There would be a number that we would be able to determine by the help of Bucks County Water and Sewer and what their experience is and other DEP people and things like that. So in other words, for the smaller complexes where maybe be 20 apartments in a small little thing, they wouldn't necessarily have to have that type of a thing. That's how I would say it would work.
Sure, that could be the standard, it could be any combination of things. Again, having heard that it's something you want us to continue to explore, again, if, I think the initial thought from everybody was, it's not a step that's necessary township-wide, but since the township and you are responsible for the health, safety, and welfare of the community. And in that role, you want us to take a look to see if there's something more that we can be doing. Then what we'll do is we'll take a look and see if there's justification for making that a requirement, and if so, how would it be implemented?
Well, I would like to direct you to do that, as long as I have the support of our council members.
Proactive.
I think everyone's in agreement with that. Okay. Thanks, Joe. Natasha?
I'm sorry, I do have one more thing that I have to bring up.
That's all right.
But obviously he's already laughing. Obviously, the stormwater and the sewage are two separate things. You are aware that the stormwater management on that property is completely destroyed. So, and that is why we also had, the extra sewage backing up into it. But, I mean, even across Street Road, it's the same way. Who is responsible? Who owns that stormwater drain?
The property owner.
The property owner, because according to DEP, the municipality owns it, but I don't know.
Which stormwater are you talking about? Which drain?
The ones that, there are actually, yeah, they run parallel together, so these are, I guess they're on their
On the
Armstrong
old
property.
school district property?
I don't know where the school district line,
But somewhere back on Armstrong or Snyder's field?
yeah, because there's multiple, drains there. And then it goes across Street Road into that, a little shopping center that's there. And actually Colleen has some very interesting pictures of where the sewage water actually accumulated and how broken down those stormwater drains are. So the concern is that, again, yes, I understand it was a freak accident with that storm water, but this could happen again. And if those aren't properly maintained, we only have 2 storm drains on our street already, and we take on so much water. So
what I can tell you, and again, Quentin and Phil, please jump in if I say something wrong. Township, even before this incident, since the 100-year storm and since the subsequent approval of the project on the Armstrong property, has looked at the storm sewer system on that property pretty extensively. There are areas of the storm sewer farther upstream from your homes, closer to Bucks Meadows, that are likely in need of some tender loving care. They are, however, still functioning, and they are still accepting stormwater, probably, the outlet structures or the inlet structures, I should say, certainly are. And there are some areas up there where we've seen sinkholes, and believe that there may be some stormwater getting into the stormwater system from up in that area, that's going into the pipe, not through an inlet, but going into the pipe, which ultimately we believe for you is a good thing. It's not surface flow that's coming down toward your homes, but it is going into the pipe. So the hope has been that as long as those structures are still functioning and they are still collecting stormwater and they're taking it down to the basin area where they dump, and then from the basin they pass through your yards and into the storm sewer in Hansel Drive, everything is open, everything is clear. We had the property owner out there last year to clear the basin, to clear out all the debris, to make sure that, that everything out there is working. Right now, everything is functioning. So, yeah, if there's another sewage overflow, which we don't believe is going to be the case anytime, we hope, ever again, but the only thing that at this point we believe that's going into the storm sewer is rainwater.
Okay, so my
And-
concern with that is, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but my concern is, yes, it's still collecting water. The purpose of those drains, and correct me if I'm wrong, is to maintain the stream that we are built upon, correct? Because our houses are built on top of a stream or creek.
I don't know if that's true or not true.
I can tell you it's true,
They're
but-
storm sewers. They're there to,
Yes.
they collect water from the surface, it goes into a pipe, and it gets piped downstream to,
And-
ultimately to the golf course.
Right, but that pipe is holding the stream and guiding it, because I guess back in the day, that's just what they thought that was okay to do. The concern is that those inlets are not properly maintained, and they're not holding water the way they should, which means that water is not going to where it should and coming out of it, because water goes to through the path of least resistance, and ultimately comes into my house. And this is why we spend so much money on waterproofing the house. And believe me, we found some issues there because of that water that should not be going that way specifically. So my concern is we get another massive rainstorm, how are we protected
Well,
on
again,
Hansel Drive?
all I can tell you, and Quentin, please feel free to jump in, is that the inlets are clear and they are functioning. So to the extent that there is surface water that is either directed to those inlets to accept it or passing over them, the water's going in. They are accepting the water. They are not, the line is not filling up so that water can't go in. They are open, they are clear, the water goes in, and it follows the piping path that it is supposed to follow. So,
So the condition of them is acceptable then per this council, am I correct?
Can I clarify a couple things?
Yep.
So, from what you're saying is you're having water in your house that you're not sure where it's coming from.
Well, I do know where it's coming from. It's coming from the ground up from that specific corner because the foundation was washing away from there. That's why I spent so much money.
Okay.
And the reason why foundation washes away, it's not from one storm, it's from a
Groundwater.
multiple occurring water passing
So,
through.
right, so basically, if there's any groundwater, if there's
Quentin?
groundwater activity,
Quentin, after she gives you the question, can you address the council?
Sure. So basically, what I'm thinking is regarding her situation, there might be a groundwater situation because I know from our engineers, they did go back. There is an underground creek in that area where the houses were built years and years and years ago.
Right.
So there could be still some more groundwater activity underground that we don't know. So in theory, even if the existing storm sewers were 100% watertight and sealed, We know they're not 100% watertight, just because of infiltration areas and some minor holes in the pipes. That water, if there's any groundwater, might not be the same water that she's having issues with, causing her problem on her foundation. Because if the storm sewers were sealed for any surface runoff, and plus the groundwater that's coming through the system, that's in the system flowing from, I'm not sure where the source is, if that was sealed off, she might still be having a problem, because you don't know which water it is. I'm not the professional one to be figuring out what groundwater it is. Only thing I've ever been involved with is, if you're having a water issue, you need to find that source and address that source. So it could be that if she's having issues with water washing away the foundation in one portion of the house, it might be that area should be excavated, see if there is any groundwater in that vicinity, and then if there is, then determine the plan of action at that point.
So everything that we could do to protect the stormwater management of the pipes and the inflow and such may also be affected by another source of groundwater, which we have no control of.
Correct. You don't know where it is or where it's going.
Because it was built on a stream, is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, so it could be, I mean, I've heard, I did a job in a neighboring township years ago where we knew we had underwater ground activity. One of the reasons, just because of that spring activity in the ground, nobody knew where it was, where the source was. One of the things that we did with the RCP pipes where we left those joints open, wrapped them in geotextile fabric so the water from that groundwater could seep into the system and pipe out. So we were trying to pick it up. Now, during the installation and when we put that pipeline in, there was no groundwater. Now, say 2 months after the fact, when the roads were in and they started building the houses and the infrastructure was all there, those pipes started taking water. So eventually that groundwater got into that pipe. Because there was no water coming in at the upper end of the system, but we were getting water discharging out, and it was coming through our open joints. So somebody knew that the water was there, and it just happened to pick it up, because it was not there when we were excavating and installing that line. Not saying that would solve her issue, but it's something that was brought to the
But it
attention.
could help the issue.
Was that?
It could help with that
It
issue.
possibly could.
So maybe it's something else that we have to look into to see, which is part of the stormwater management things that we're going to be doing here in the township.
Right.
And this is a good place to start and say, hey, how can we do this? How can we do this right? Let's take it from where we're having the problem now and figure it out, and then we can move to the next.
Right, like I said, you just have to figure out where the problem is and kind of backtrack to find the source.
One of the township has looked at this, and again, part of, as council is aware,
Oh, is it? Oh, I see.
the land development approval for Armstrong has a significant stormwater management facility for the property. And the hope had been, or I don't know if it's the hope, but let's say the expectation had been that that project would be getting underway, and that, the stormwater facilities that are out there would be replaced with the newer, better, 21st century design, and that a lot of what's out there now would no longer be the case. Again, for better or for worse, some might argue for better. That project has not moved forward. So.
Right, so we have to do something about it, because if it's not moving forward, and maybe it'll never move forward, we can't wait for that and hope that that's going to happen. We need to start looking at the issues now and figure out where it is, and let's figure out if there's an underground stream, and is there a way to get it into that pipe and get it out of there instead of into the houses?
I did tell the council at that point that we cannot wait for him to build anything. We have to take care of our own properties before. I didn't know how long he was planning on delaying, but I did bring this up to the council at the time. But, I mean, there is so much water delegated to storm management. When is Hansel Drive going to be actually part of that project? I mean, this is all in your budget.
You're absolutely correct. We don't even know if that's going to be built.
Right, but besides that, we
That's
can't
what
even
I'm saying.
think about
That's
that.
exactly right.
I don't even want
You're
to begin to
absolutely
think
right.
about that property being built. But as far as storm management goes, the township has budgeted and has received grants. When is Hansel Drive going to be part of those plans?
Did we?
There's
I mean, I
money
can
in-
tell you what you
there's-
said on the budget meetings.
There's money in the budget for stormwater, yes. To the extent that anything's been engineered to replace it, I don't know, because again, as I said, we've been out, we've inspected, everything is functioning out there. So what the next step is, I don't know that a determination's been made yet.
So what's the difference between Hansel Drive and, you know, all the other storm management that you have actually completed? As far as the pipes go, the quality of the pipes, you know, because, you know, you've got Cornwell's Basin, Cricket Lane Basin, you've got Bensalem Boulevard Stormwater Restoration, you've got all these other things that you guys have done already, or are budgeted to do. What is the difference between us and them, as far as those pipes are concerned? Water's gonna get in one way or the other.
There could be any number of considerations. Many of the projects that you just spoke to are, you know, affecting more than just a street, in all candor. They are, you know, it's a region of the township. It's an entire neighborhood that goes underwater at an inch of rain, not at a 100-year storm. So, you know, so everything is looked at, you know, I don't want to say everything's given a priority, but everything's looked at to see how big an area can we fix with the smallest amount of resources. That's where we go first. If we can keep 50 homes from you know, getting flooded every time there's an inch of rain, and we can do it by expending this, that's where we'll go first. Some of these other problems, where it's a smaller universe and it's a much more expensive fix, again, that's not to say that it doesn't get done, but there are areas throughout this township that, I'm not telling any of you anything you don't know, that, you know, a rainstorm, you know, of any magnitude, and people are heading for the hills. So it's not that nothing's being done, and as all of you know, we've been looking at the concept of creating a stormwater authority, an entity that could be responsible for taking over all of the stormwater problems in the township, identifying them, funding them, and getting them done. You know, but again, that's not something that gets done overnight, because like everything else, whether it's paving roads and fixing potholes or reconstructing intersections and replacing streetlights and anything else, it all comes at a cost.
I mean, you budgeted for it, and there seems to be more than enough from what I'm looking at your budget. I guess Hansel Drive is only important, maybe next.
Now,
after
please,
the next
please don't,
100-year
please,
storm.
you just heard me sit here for an
I-
hour and talk about everything that we did regarding a
we
sole
had to-
incident that occurred on January 17th. A lot of resources of this township, professional resources, my time, the engineer's time, DEP, Bucks Water and Sewer, a lot of time was spent getting this council all the answers we got them, not just about that, but everything else that was asked that night. So please don't say that you're being ignored.
No, I'm not
Please
saying,
don't say
that is not what I said. I did thank you for everything that you did. I appreciate it. I think we got more answers than we expected to get. But, I mean, as far as storm, you know what, it doesn't matter, because we're the ones who have to live through it. I don't think you guys really realize how difficult it is to live through a rainstorm.
No, we do. We do. This community was hit by that storm. You took it hard, but this community was hit by it.
Yeah, you guys stood in
Okay,
my
I got
house.
water in my basement. My house wasn't flooded, but I got water in my basement. I had to deal with it.
I'm sorry, that's not even a quarter of what we had to deal with.
No, but that's not my point. But at the end of the day, and forgive me if I'm out of line, but there are some problems that government just can't solve. One of them was I got water in my basement. It was an inconvenience to me, and I had things that had to be replaced, and I had to put in an insurance claim and all that. It's certainly not the magnitude of what you had on that day.
Joe, I agree with you, and I don't want to keep this getting heated. There are a lot of things that this township is responsible for with stormwater management in this township. So that's what we're working on, trying to get to that point where we can take care of those things, take care of everything that needs to be done. We do what we can with the funds that we have today, but we really have to get into the future and start working on these other things. There's a lot of underground streams in Bensalem that we don't even know about, and because it's grown and grown and grown and grown. And these are things that we have to get to. And once we get the stormwater management thing up and running, these things can be done. Go after the grant monies, the federal monies, the state monies, all the monies to get these projects done. It's just on what's the timeline, and that's what we're working
No,
on.
and I understand that. My question was, where is Hansel Drive in that? That
So,
was my only question. I
If I'm
wasn't
not
trying to start-
mistaken, last time you had asked that, and I think Mr. Pizzo had addressed the fact that one of the gaps that we have discovered during our normal review of our own property, township property, is at the country club where we are doing work there that would help, because the creek from Hansel Drive goes under Street Road, through the church, across to the country club, and if there's the bridges and they're collecting things that are coming through, and they're not able to go through, that becomes part of the stopgap that goes back to Hansel Drive, correct?
Well, that's correct, and
One of the projects that we do have, that hopefully if we do have a large rainstorm, and there is no stoppage between the bridge and Hansel Drive or Street Road, it won't back up to Hansel Drive in theory, unless it's a storm of the 21 storm, which we hope we don't have. Something like the 21 storm, I had 3 inches of water in my family room, or my porch, which was going into my family room. And I've experienced what you guys have experienced on Hansel Drive. I personally have experienced it on Hansel Drive, so I understand. But I don't think that a storm of that magnitude, we can stop where water is going, because Mother Nature does what Mother Nature wants to do. And I hate saying that, because I've experienced it. I just don't know if we are trying things downstream to get it closer to the bigger streams.
well, that's correct. Let me just,
We appreciate that. I mean, that explanation, we appreciate knowing that, because, knowing that that is a connection to our backup, yes.
You have to come up to the microphone so
sorry.
people can hear you.
It's Colleen from Hansel Drive. But
Colleen.
we appreciate you saying that, because to us, we don't see that.
Yeah,
But
that's what I was trying to-
we were mentioned in the budget of 2021. We know the funds are, projected out, but we don't see the work being done. You tell us that pipes need tender loving care, but what does that mean to us? So, we see a lot of flooding in that area. Our grounds are flooded all the time. I've been dealing with it for 10 years. So, just to have that, to say, okay, yes, we are working on it, we are moving up, a progression of some sort in the area. We get, Bensalem is underwater. I mean, there's plenty of places, you look at the township building on a rainy day, you can't walk on the grounds. You can't walk in the parks, you can't do anything, it's flooded. So we get that there's stormwater management has to be done, but is there a timeline for all of it? Or are we just waiting for Pandia to do his thing on the Armstrong property? Or, are we waiting for funds from somebody else? Do we have the funds? Where is the project? And maybe that is a team that needs to be developed in the township, so it takes it off the council and you guys, and somebody else that can handle it and focus on it. Because we realize that you have other things to focus on, not just stormwater management. I get that. You're a council of 5, that can't handle everything. So yes, if that needs to be a team, but we're just trying to ask where is that stormwater management, and what does tender loving care to a pipe mean? I'm not a plumber, so I don't know what that means. Is it cracked? Is it broken? Is it, we see the sinkholes, we know they're there. But what does it mean to us?
Phil, do you have a response?
Well, we're actively addressing stormwater. A couple things to keep in mind, and I don't mean any disrespect to anybody or any neighborhood with regard to what's happening within the township, because there's 70,000 people, tons of commerce, streets, everything. And we're an older community as well with regard to our infrastructure. So the lifespan of much of our infrastructure, drainage, roadways, everything else, is being maintained, but it's a lot of it's reached the limit. We've already spoken about the reinforced concrete pipe that we're not allowing anymore. We're using the more efficient plastic piping. We talked about that earlier today. Things like that are changing. We have bridges in the township. We have creeks in the township. The creeks over the years have changed course and are undermining people's homes and doing a lot of different things within the township. Stormwater itself has grown exponentially because of aging infrastructure and changes in patterns of streams and so forth, the rains, etc. So when we look at something to do with regard to infrastructure, we have to figure out how we're going to pay for it, which we are actively pursuing grants, and we're changing the way that we're looking at these parcels and so forth. We're looking at it from a watershed perspective. And that watershed that we're talking about here, not that it's any more important than anywhere else in the township, is, I can't remember, it's an unbelievably high number of acres that accommodate that, from Byberry Road and toward Galloway, all the way through and ending up in the golf course, in streams that end up going down toward Village Green and splitting off into the Pequessing and everywhere else. It's very intense. We also have areas in other parts of the township that have no storm sewer systems that we're looking at. Belmont Hills, no storm sewers there. So we have the areas of Bristol Road that are flooding, that we're working on. And as Mr. Pizzo said, some of these areas take into account many, many, many hundreds and hundreds of homes. We have infrastructure on Pascagoula Boulevard that, because of the age of everything and the way things are draining now, that water's done damage to pipes within the road that are 10 feet deep that have to end up being replaced. So there's a lot of issues that we're juggling with regard to that, hence the issue of stormwater management and an authority in how to pay for this. So we're looking at things now to be able to handle things on a watershed basis, and that's why we've mandated and talked to council about it with regard to anything that comes up. We're getting over and above what we can from developers to help with the stormwater issue. We are doing it for single-family lots. We're doing it for 10 homes. We're doing it wherever we can. And we might not have always done things that way within the township. We're looking at it holistically on how one thing affects the other. So the best I can say with regard to Hansel is Hansel Drive was built, probably mistakenly, on a top of a stream. That stream is still in existence. It's on every map you could find that goes back to the 1930s that shows a stream right there. Correct. That water course is still there. To change that water course is heroic. It would be heroic to change that. It's like changing a branch of a stream, which that eventually is. So how can we manage that without changing that? Well, we look at Hansel Drive and we have somewhat of a fix that may occur if Armstrong develops and gets their storm sewer in there. Not coincidentally, that their storm sewer and the sanitary sewers are all part of this whole conundrum there. So that's on the books. At least that's on the books of something that's going to be of help. So If we have that system ready to go, which should help, I'm not going to say it's going to fix it all, because, again, the homes are built on top of a stream.
Do you have a report available of all these things you were just talking about that could be given to council so we have an idea of what the township is doing? Is there a report available?
We could certainly come up with a project list for you, but there's not a report on, we're putting out fires is what we're doing with regard to stormwater and where we can do it and where we can afford to do it consistently. The golf course is one of them. We have washed out bridges on the golf course. We have bridges in the township that are being, real bridges that carry traffic on it that are undermined.
I'm not
with
arguing any of those
so-
points. I'm
so-
saying to you, is there a report of what we're looking to do, where we go, where could we go to get the things that we need? Do you have a report
Well,
like that?
I wouldn't call it a report, but I wouldn't call it a report, Mr. Cleary, but I could get you a list of the types of projects that we're working on that are in a queue or something that we have to find money for.
Right.
And that sort of thing. We do
I
have those
would personally
projects.
hold a fundraiser.
Well,
Let me have it at the golf course.
There's no fundraiser that can bring in
No,
the amount of money.
Well,
that
if we
needs
do
to
it
be
every
done.
year for the next 5,
How
10,
about
maybe.
50?
we focused on things that you think about that you take for granted because no one's around those areas anymore. But remember all the work that we've done on State Road with regard to raising that. And now we have PennDOT doing a major project to raise State Road. So we won't be flooded out so people can get, from a life safety perspective, get out of there if there's a flood.
I'm not arguing
No,
any of
no,
those
no, I
points.
know,
I'm just saying.
but I'm just saying, so they're the things that we're dealing with that affect hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people.
Give us an idea of what the administration is looking to do, so that we know
I
what
have to tell you,
projects there
it
are.
feels, I understand your job is hard, and I feels better knowing that you're just putting out fires, because to us, it always felt like we were being ignored. To know that you're just putting out fires, I deal with that every day. So, I mean, like, I listen to my husband come home and all he does is put out fires, you know what I mean, like at work, that's all he does. I get it, it's hard, but, we keep hammering. To just have some honesty actually felt good, to say, hey, we don't have the money, what are we doing? If we can start little projects, I don't know what the answer is. I'm not, we feel like there was no answer. Just to have the honesty, to me, is better than not having anything at all.
Well, I think
Just get-
tonight you got, I don't know if you had expected this lengthy presentation
No,
and how much we really put into your project.
yeah,
And we
absolutely,
told
and we
you,
appreciate it.
we told you to come back because we were
absolutely.
specifically, as Phil had just said, interested in resolving this one problem that was immediately a problem for you. And that's what Mr. Pizzo was mentioning to you as far as we were and what we're doing in there. I'm going to ask you if you would give me the permission to conclude this meeting since
Absolutely.
we've gone beyond. I'm asking you because I want you to have everything you wanted to hear.
Yeah, no.
And then we'll continue this conversation and work, as you know, which we'll
Yeah.
be doing, keeping in contact with you.
Yeah,
All
absolutely.
right, thanks, Colleen.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Okay, thanks again. Thank you, Natasha. Okay, I'm going to move on to other business by supporting personnel. Phil, would you like to add anything?
No, Mr. President.
Thank you. Debbie? Mr. Pizzo? I think you're talked out by now. He's good?
Just want to offer my prayers for Officer Fitzgerald, the Temple University
Temple
Police
University.
officer who was killed. My heart goes out to all of our police. I'm a huge supporter of our law enforcement. I thank you guys for what you do, your support, and I feel for all of you every day. But thank you, and thank your families, and prayers for Officer Fitzgerald. Thank you.
Stace?
I ditto Michelle in terms of Officer Fitzgerald. It's always hard to lose someone of that commitment to our community. We have daylight savings time coming up
Before our next meeting.
before our next meeting. And if you have a chance to go to any of the St. Patrick's Day parades, St. Patrick's Day parades are usually the Sunday before St. Patrick's Day.
So just before
So,
meeting.
yes, the big Philadelphia one, my children will be performing, so a little plug for them and all the other performers coming out that day from all over the region. They come from far and near, and our next meeting will be my father's 90th birthday.
Wow, congratulations.
So, yes, so we won't be celebrating it right then, but we will be celebrating it after. He's basically a lifelong resident of Bensalem, graduate in 1951 from the old Cornwall School, and, Eddington,
Good news.
born and bred, or I should say bred, more so. And so, yes, so he will be 90, so a huge shout out to my dad for that.
Doesn't
Yep.
seem like he's 90, so young as he is.
He does not seem it. He runs circles. He's like
He does.
other people of that era. They
He
keep
does.
running and running and running. They're like the Energizer bunnies. So, but thank you
Thank
for letting me
you.
go on a little bit after a long evening.
Councilman Polari?
Thank you, sir. I have nothing. Have a nice evening.
And,
Sleep.
Okay, and I'm just going to just reiterate, the next meeting is March the 13th, before St. Patty's Day, so everyone will be sober. That's good to hear that. And as you know, my family is involved in the military as well as the police departments and such, so of course, I share the sentiment of all of us for the loss of a life of a Philadelphia police officer, Sergeant Fitzpatrick now, Fitzgerald. All right, thank you. All right, with that, I conclude the meeting. Good night, everyone.